So Charlie started talking last week. Charlie, for those of you that don't know, is up in New York. He and John, and that's why we can't figure out the order of service and things like that. We depend on them and we miss them, but they're up there, and Charlie's been sending me pictures and things seem to be going really well. But he started last week this series called Follow. And we're leading up towards December, towards our youth convention, which the theme is Follow. And we're teaching students, we're hoping to draw them in, teach them to follow Jesus and find their purpose. And, in doing so, we just wanted to get the church on board kind of with where the youth movement has been going in our denomination and things like that. And Jesus calls all of us, regardless of age, regardless of race, regardless of anything. He calls us every day to follow him. And in doing so, that's how we grow. And today, I want to start off by asking you, if you were to look at churches you've been to in the past, this church, Christian groups, things like that, if you were to look at those things and those entities, and I asked you to answer the question, what does it mean to follow? What would you say from looking at these entities or churches or things like that? And you can't answer out loud, it's okay. I'm a youth pastor, so I try to get them to talk. But they don't answer either, so I guess y'all won't. So I wrote down a list, luckily, because I never trust them to answer either. Things that it seems like we take note of when someone's following. And the first thing is involvement. Christians come to church, right? If you follow in Jesus, you come to church. And, when Sunday school is big, you come up once a year, and everybody that had perfect attendance would come up and get a little pin or something like that. And we valued being there. We valued presence, which is a good thing. Another thing is, I think, how you worship. Do you raise your hands? Do you get into it, or do you just stand there and think about lunch? Followers worship. They raise their hands, things like that. Another thing, being well behaved. Wearing your Sunday best. How do your kids behave? I think that's one of the things we look at. Please don't look at that with me. And I just got this idea when I was going to church growing up that when I got there on Sunday morning, it seemed like everyone was happy, and everyone was glad to be there, and everyone had everything together. They looked nice, they smiled, and I was like, I really got some work to do, because I don't feel like that early on Sunday morning. I don't like waking up. Much less can I act like everything's perfect in my life. And I think that those things, the behaviors that we value, have created this culture in our churches that you believe first, and then you start behaving like we do, and then you can belong with us. And I think that's evident to people outside the church because of the things like attendance and things like that we value. And, you believe first, then it changes your behavior, and then once you behave like us, you can become one of us. You can belong with us. And for this morning, I'm just going to challenge you. Let's suspend those ideas for just this time I have you guys. Let's just put that on hold. Let's take away our assumptions, and let's pretend like we're looking at this scripture for the first time. Because sometimes we learn so many things and we observe so many things from different churches and things like that the water kind of gets muddy, because it's not only what the Bible says, but the church's traditions and habits and the people involved that all contribute to our view of what it means to follow Jesus. So for this time, take away your intellect, take away your experiences, and let's just pretend like we're looking at what it means to follow from this scripture for the first time when Jesus calls his first disciples. And we're going to start in Matthew 9 if you want to turn there. And we have accounts of this in all three of the synoptic gospels, the Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They all tell this story. And I picked Matthew's version of this because this is Matthew talking about Jesus calling Matthew. It doesn't get more accurate than the guy that was called. So we're going to look at Matthew retelling the story of when Jesus called him. Matthew 9, verses 9 through 13. It says, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? On hearing this, Jesus said, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Okay. Sorry. So I want you guys to picture this. Jesus just walks by this table where Matthew's sitting. Some of your books say Levi, some of your translations, and that is the same person. But Jesus walks by this table, and he's sitting there collecting taxes, and he says, come follow me. And Matthew gets up and follows. Great faith, right? To just blindly follow. I don't think so. But what happens next is we see that Jesus doesn't ask Matthew to leave his life. Jesus goes into Matthew's life. He goes to his house and he eats with his friends. And I think it's really funny because if you look, it says the Pharisees saw this and they asked, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? So I want you to look at that. Tax collectors were so bad that sinful people were like, we may be sinners, but at least we're not tax collectors. We don't want to be in that category. We don't want them in our category. So it's tax collectors and sinners. Sinners and sinners who don't want to be associated with these sinners. This is the guy that Jesus called. The one who sinners were like, we're not with him. But Jesus comes to his house, into his life. And I want you to kind of imagine this. All these sinners and tax collectors are in the house, and they're having a meal together. And it's probably not like church, because this is people who don't go to church in this house together. It's probably more like a party. And the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, come, and they're probably outside yelling in, hey, Jesus, because they're not going into a sinner's house. They're too good for that, right? So they're standing on the outside, and they can't get to Jesus because he's inside with the sinners. So they call his disciples over, and they say, go ask your teacher why he eats with these people. And Jesus comes back. I don't know if he yells to them or if he sends a message through the disciples. I think he probably yells it because Matthew's sitting there and he hears this. And Jesus is like, it's not the well that need a doctor, but the sick. So if I'm Matthew or one of these tax collectors or sinners sitting there, I'm thinking, he just called me sick. I know what this means. It means that those people out there are well, and in here, we're the sick ones. And there's a moment here where, you have to decide, do I want to continue eating with this guy? Or is it time to ask him to leave? And it seems like the people say, it's kind of offensive, but he's right. Those people out around the gate who won't come into my house have been calling me sick for years, essentially. And Jesus just says it's not the well that need a doctor, but the sick. And I could have put myself in that position and think, I'm a little bit offended, but if I'm honest, he's right. And, he goes on to say, find out what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. And he's talking to people who've sacrificed a lot for the appearance of righteousness. That's why they're not in the sinner's house. They're outside because they've sacrificed hanging out with people like this. But he goes to them and says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. The problem is, those people value their own sacrifice to the point that they have no mercy for the people inside that house. And Jesus said, your sacrifice is not important to me. Mercy is. And he goes on to say, I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. So, like I said, if you're one of the sick people inside, you might be a little bit offended, but you say, I'm sick, but I'm still valued. This guy wants to spend time with me. I may be sick, but this guy protects me. This guy is here for me. He's not out there with them. That's what they knew of the religious establishment, us and them. And this guy, Jesus, seems to break down barriers. And he seems to come and call people who have not sacrificed anything to follow him. Okay, so we're going to move on to another story in Luke chapter 5. Go ahead and turn there if you have your Bibles. This is the calling of Simon, Peter, and Andrew, and then James and John. And this happened before the first one, but because there are disciples there when the Pharisees call them and send them a message to Jesus. So this happened first, but we're going to look at it second. Luke 5, verses 1 through 10. It says, one day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen, who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. Simon answered, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets. When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man. For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken, and so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, Don't be afraid, from now on you will fish for people. Okay, so we move to Luke's gospel because in Matthew this account just says Jesus is walking by the shoreline, sees people fishing and says, hey, come follow me. And they drop their stuff and they come follow them. That seems very faithful to drop everything, but I'm skeptical. That's just kind of my personality. Sometimes I'm very skeptical of even religious things. And so I look at the why and everything, and it may seem like a huge act of faith to just drop everything and follow this man, but it could also seem like irresponsibility, right? Well, I don't really like fishing, so I'm out. So we've got to look at another story. So this story goes into more detail, and it says this whole time that the fishermen were finishing up from fishing the night before, and in this time. These fishermen would fish all night, and then when the sun comes up, the fish go deeper because it gets hotter, and fishing isn't as good. So that's when they take their nets out of the water, they hang them up, they get all the frisbees and drink cans and stuff like that out of them, and get them ready for the next night of fishing. And in doing this, the whole time that they're cleaning the nets and doing that stuff, they're listening to Jesus teach this crowd. Simon Peter sitting in the boat with him while he's teaching. So it's not necessarily just a blind call to follow. It is it's based in who Jesus is. And as they hear him teach, and as he finishes up, he tells Simon, pull out into deeper water and cast your nets. And Simon's like, you come, you sit in my boat for a while. I really want to go to sleep, but I trust you enough that I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to indulge you. Even though I'm a fisherman, I know what I'm doing. We tried all night and we caught nothing. because I've listened to you teach, you've earned just enough of my trust that I'll indulge you here. So they pull out, and I imagine Simon's just thinking, oh, I'm going to have to pull these nets back in and clean them again after this is finished. And something weird happens. They pull in so many fish that the nets begin to break. And I want you to see this change here. When Jesus tells Simon to put out into deeper water and to cast the nets, he says, Master, I've been doing this all night. But afterwards, when they pull these fish in, Simon drops to his knees and he says, away from me, Lord. It goes from master to Lord because Jesus proved himself. What Jesus proved is that I'm a better fisherman than you are. I'm better at your career than you are. And that earns a little bit of trust. That may sound weird, but Jesus asked Peter to do something Peter always does in a slightly different way. He doesn't completely change his life. He doesn't say, you've been a fisherman all your life, let's go make pots. Let's go be carpenters like I am. He doesn't say that. He says, do what you've always done in a slightly different way. And I think this goes to show, I know Peter's thinking this is a waste of my time until they pull in all those fish. And then the fish don't even matter because I found something far more important. A man who's better at being me than I am. And we see this in the fact that he leaves all the fish and walks away from it and follows this man. But there are a couple things we can take from both of these stories. The first one is, the first guys to follow Jesus weren't sure that he was the Messiah. Some of them may have had an idea because he performed miracles. Maybe some of them were hopeful, but they weren't sold out on the fact that this guy was the guy. And at this time, there's no such thing as Christians because this is Christ. And he doesn't have a church yet. He doesn't have followers yet, except for these people. So what that says to me is believing is not a requirement for following, because Jesus asked people who don't necessarily believe to follow him. So if we look back at our believe, behave, belong, Jesus takes out that first believe, because that's not necessary for them to take the step and follow him. When we look at these guys, like I said, Matthew was a tax collector, so he's lower than sinners. Sinners didn't even want to be associated with him. So there was anything impressive about him. There wasn't anything that he'd done that stood out. Jesus didn't call him because of his potential. They had no special skills that we know of. And basically what we see is Jesus says, skeptics are welcome, sinners are welcome, doubters are welcome. Everybody's welcome to come and follow me. Now, when you think about that, how does that line up with that first list that went through your head when I said, what does it look like to follow Jesus if we look at the church? Jesus didn't say, do you have your perfect attendance badges from Sunday school? He didn't say, show me your Bible. He didn't say, bring me your resume. He didn't say, bring me your SAT scores. He didn't say anything like that. He said, follow me. And I think the LGBTQ community has done this really well. We as the church are against homosexuality, but when I look at them, they welcome anybody. And they say, sure, come in, we'll just add another letter on our little abbreviation thing, and you can be part of us. It started LGB, and now it's LGBTQ. They keep adding things, and I think that was our job. That's what the church was supposed to be. We were supposed to be the open door to anybody. And somewhere along the way, we started pushing people away, and they had to search somewhere else for love and acceptance. And that terrifies me. But if we follow Jesus' example, he's the one saying, come here. He's the one saying, you don't even have to come here. I'm going to go to your house. And we fast forward, and it's like we have the church here, and we have the rest of life over here, and they're completely separated in a lot of situations. And I'm not just talking about this church. I think this church loves its community amazingly well. But even in this community, you have stereotypes that you have to break down because churches have messed people up. Because we don't just say, come follow me. We say, become like me, and then you can be with me. And it's scary to see that difference. And as we move on, what did Jesus ask of these followers? He didn't say, Andrew, you need to quit smoking. Peter, you drink too much. He didn't worry about their language. He didn't say, Matthew, you're a tax collector. You probably need to stop that. He didn't say anything like that. He didn't talk about their behavior at all. He said, follow me. And what he asked for them was to give him a chance, to allow him to teach them. Follow me. This was a common practice where a rabbi would take students and they'd follow him and the rabbi would teach them. This is the call. Come follow me and I'll teach you. That's all he asked. Come follow me. And the rest was work he put in. He proved himself. He taught them. He invested. And I think it's funny because over and over throughout Scripture we see these places where Jesus kind of tests the disciples to see if their faith is growing. And, one night they go out in a boat and he stays behind and he walks out on the water to them. That would really freak you out, right? I can imagine Jesus kind of laughing as he's doing it because anybody logical would freak out if they saw someone walking out on the water because that doesn't happen. And, Peter finally gets enough faith to say, let me come out there with you if that's you. And when Peter starts to sink, he says, why did you doubt? Another time, we're going to talk about later, they go out in this boat and a storm comes up. And the disciples, the apostles are all freaking out because they think they're going to die because water's coming over the sides of the boat and everything. And Jesus is sleeping. And they're like, don't you even care about us? And Jesus wakes up, calms the storm, and says, do you still have no faith? Another time, they're on a hillside with thousands of people. And Jesus is like, y'all should give them something to eat. And they're like, you remember we were fishermen and we left that to follow you. So we're broke and it would take years' wages, even if we had wages, to feed all these people. And Jesus is like, feed them. Once again, he continues to test them and see if their faith is growing. So it seems like faith is what is significant to Jesus. Because guess what? They keep screwing up, and he doesn't say, get out of here. He doesn't say, I've given you this many chances, and you failed every time, so now I'm going to ask you to leave, and I'm going to find somebody else. No. He continues to pour into them, and the challenge and the call is still there to follow. Okay, so that's what Jesus asked of them. Like I said, I'm naturally a skeptical person. And, when someone tells me to follow them, I'm like, what's the catch? What's it going to cost me? Because there's usually a cost, right? There's usually a string attached. If this guy is working miracles, performing miracles, if he sounds like the best teacher I've ever heard, and then he calls me to follow him, there's something I'm missing here. So what is the risk? And essentially, at the beginning, there's really not a risk. Jesus takes all the risk because he says, come follow me. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to do anything. Just follow me. So that means if I don't prove to be who I say I am, you're free to leave. But as it transitions and these people begin to trust him, it gets a little deeper. And the risk there is, if Jesus isn't trustworthy, we fail. If Jesus isn't who he says he is, I'm unemployed now because I left my job to follow him. If Jesus isn't who he says he is, I'm in a lot of trouble. Another thing that's a risk comes from Mark 8 in 34 and 35. It says, "Then he called the crowd to him, along with his disciples, and said, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it.'" So, there it is. My skeptical mind found the catch. I have to deny myself. I have to give up what I want to follow him. But he goes on to say, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me or for the gospel will save it. So it means following Jesus will eventually cost you something. Whether it be a relationship, a habit, a pet sin that comforts you, things like that. It will eventually cost you something. But we never see him challenge any of the disciples to give any behavior up other than disbelief. So when I look at this and I think he asked me to deny myself, when I'm honest, I don't really like myself. So that's not really that much of a cost to me. Because he says, any of you who try to hold on to these things are going to lose everything. But those of you who let go of these things will gain so much more. So even his call to sacrifice is not really a sacrifice. We're just trading in what we think is important for something way better, way more significant. So we trade our sin and our temporary comforts for things that permanently comfort us. Logically, even for a skeptic like me, it seems like a pretty good deal. It seems like he's telling us to trade in something mediocre for something amazing. But some of us can't get past the fact that it is going to cost something. And a lot of people, I think, make an emotional response to follow Jesus because they're afraid of the consequences of hell. They're afraid of what bad's going to happen. And they think, if I give my life to Jesus, bad things aren't going to happen. Things will be good for me. I'll be successful. Things like that. And unfortunately, God doesn't promise us that bad things won't happen because we're a follower. Because what kind of God would he be? He says he's just and compassionate, but taking care of his people and not anyone else. What kind of God would that be when you stop to look at it? But in our emotions, we think, why do you let bad things happen to me? Because I've sacrificed all this stuff that's going to kill me to follow you, and then you don't protect me. You don't take care of me. You don't fix all my problems. And I think that is the risk. We have this idea that our sacrifice is significant, even though what we sacrifice is things that lead to pain. And even in this, when Jesus says to follow, the only things he asks us to give up are things that are destroying us. He doesn't ask us to give up our hobbies. He doesn't say, Peter, I know you love fishing. You got to throw that fishing rod away. He says, I'm going to make you fishers of men instead of fish. You like catching fish? This is going to be even more exciting. This is going to be even more significant for you. And I think kind of the problem we come to is every religion, every belief system, everything, not just Christianity, not just Wesleyan, not all belief systems, Hinduism, Islam, things like that. It seems like they all go, we start out, yes, I'm saved by grace. But it goes to behavior. It moves from Jesus saved me and there's nothing else to I've got to behave a certain way so I can belong. All belief systems go to this. And why I think that is, we gravitate towards behavior because we can control our behavior. At least most of us. I don't know about some of you guys. But we can follow rules, right? We can make a checklist. We can know I shouldn't do this. I should do this. I can check that off and feel good about myself today. But relationships are a little messier. A relationship is harder to know where you stand in that relationship. Give me a checklist any day and I can at least know where I stand. So I go to what I can control. And, we go to the things that make us feel good about ourselves. We like control. We like being in control. And that, for many of us, keeps us in the shallow end of our faith. Because we can still touch the bottom. We're still in control. And we can get the good feelings of trusting Jesus, the refreshingness of the water, but we can still touch the bottom. And that's where many of us live. The problem is, I believe the shallow end is very boring. I believe the shallow end limits us so much. And, I think we want that checklist mentality. I think it's easy to say, Jesus, I trust you with my soul after I die. Because guess what? When I'm dead, I can't control anything anymore anyway. I'm dead. So it's easy to say, Jesus, I trust you then when I can't control anything, when I have no other option but to submit control to you, I trust you. But what about when you're still alive? What about when you're still in that shallow end of the pool and you're thinking, wow, this is nice, but is there something more? And I get that feeling when I go into churches. This Jesus thing feels good, but there's got to be more. And I think a lot of times in churches, what we see is people who are bored because they've always lived in the shallow end. They've never trusted God enough to give God the opportunity to show His power, to show His faithfulness. So we stay in the shallow end and we splash around and say, everyone look at me, let's pretend this thing is fun. And here's the problem. For some people, the reward even is not what we're looking for. Because we want Jesus to fix everything. We want to be happy. We want to cut ties with the baggage and the pain of our past. And we want to just move on, clean slate, everything like that. The problem is our minds have not been reset. We still have the same memories. We still have the same subconscious thoughts going through our mind as we make decisions that we had before we chose to follow God. So when we look at the reward, we see that it's not monetary gain because these guys left their jobs. We see that it's not success because after Jesus was crucified, these guys were persecuted. Many of them died pretty horrendous deaths. And we look and we say, well, if you want me to risk denying myself, and if you call me to follow, where does that lead? What's it going to look like for me? And we're going to go back to this story, and at first it might not make sense, but I want y'all to hang with me. And this is that story I talked about earlier in Mark 4, verse 35. It says, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up, shouting, Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown? When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, Silence, be still. Suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? The disciples were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? They asked each other. Even the wind and waves obey him. So, in this story, we have the disciples that were terrified, they were panicking, they feel like they're going to die. These are fishermen. They fished this water their whole life. So this is what must have been significant to frighten even the fishermen, for them to say, we're going to die. And wherever you are in life, there are going to be situations, whether you're a follower of Jesus, whether you're a skeptic, whether you're an atheist, wherever you are across the spectrum, there are going to be things in your life that shake you, that rock your faith, that make you question things, that make you doubt. You're going to be afraid. And most of us in this boat, in this situation, would be doing exactly what the disciples were doing, freaking out, getting ready to throw Andrew or Nathaniel or somebody overboard so that you can lighten the load, maybe save yourself for a little bit longer. We'd be panicking. And then we see Jesus get up, and he calms the storm with just his voice. And after that, the disciples there should be relieved, right? The storm's gone. What they were afraid of, what was threatening them, was gone. There should be this relief. But it says they were terrified. Why were they terrified? Because they found out that in a situation where they had absolutely no control, this God was still in control. This God controlled nature. The wind and the waves listen to this guy. That's frightening, right? So what the reward is, when you have problems in life, when you have struggles, when you have fears, when you feel like everything is surrounded in this storm, you have a God that can calm that. That's bigger than your situation. It's bigger than your fears. It's bigger than your struggles. You have a God that can speak into that situation and calm. So the reward is, when you follow Jesus, your faith grows. If you take the steps, when Jesus calls you to follow and you take a step, he proves himself. He comes through, whether that's a step to get up from your tax collector table, or a step to step out of a boat on the water, or a step to be in a boat and go into a storm and allow him to calm it. Wherever it is, he proves himself. And that's what you get, faith. What keeps me up at night is the things that I worry about, the things that I'm afraid of, the things in my life that I have doubts about. What Jesus wants for me is to take all that away and replace it with complete trust in him. So I know in my worst situation, in my darkest hour, that he's still bigger and he still loves me. And I'm reminded, there's this book by C.S. Lewis, most of you know, called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And there's a lion in the book, obviously, and he represents God. And these kids come into this world that's not theirs, and they're asking questions about the lion, ask them who represents God, and they say, is he safe? And the response is, he is not safe, but he is good. And I think that beautifully demonstrates God's not going to fix your world. He's not going to make everything okay. He sent these disciples into turmoil. But these disciples who, after 3 years with Jesus, after watching everything, the week before his death, when he was at the Last Supper, when he was talking to them about him dying and stuff, they were still grumbling over who was going to have the most important seat. Who's going to be most honored in heaven. They still didn't get it. They still didn't have the faith that he wanted to teach them. Even after that, Peter denies him 3 times. The man he said he'd die for, the man he said he'd go anywhere for, the man he declared as the Christ, he denied this guy. After 3 years of living with him, after seeing all the miracles, after watching everything, he still screws up. And we ask him that, what was Peter thinking? But then we go on to see something happened. And this man that was a coward became the rock that the church was built on. These men that scattered, these men that were quarreling over who would be the most significant, died for this man named Jesus. Something changed when they chose to follow him, that changed them from fishermen and tax collectors to people who were willing to die for this man. And Charlie talked last week about roots. And in Colossians 2:6-7, he read this. And he said, "So then, just as you received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to live your lives in him, rooted and built up in him, strengthened in the faith as you were taught, and overflowing with thankfulness." So, I love this idea of the root system. And I've talked about roots and things like that a lot, I feel like. Maybe that's just the youth. But the thing that we want to do when Jesus calls is we want to say, let me fix this. I need to change this. I need to do this. And then I'll follow. And basically saying, let me strengthen my roots. Let me make my roots significant. And then I'll follow you. The problem is, by the time we get to that point, we're so stuck in its roots that we're not going to move. And Jesus says, rooted and built up in him. He said, you don't need a root system because I have a really good one. Just tap into that. Because if you have roots over there, that's where you're going to be going for your comfort. That's where you're going to be going for your security and things like that. He's saying, be rooted in me because I want to be your comfort. I want to be where you go when you're in crisis. I want to be the one you trust. Be rooted in me. And we're like, but I'm not perfect. And Jesus is like, yeah, I know. Come be rooted in me. Because the thing that we strive for, being good enough for God, actually disqualifies us from what Jesus said in the beginning that he wanted. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Well, Jesus, I'm sacrificing all these things. I stopped drinking, I stopped smoking so I could come to you. He's like, yeah, well, now you're righteous and you don't need me. He's saying, come as you are, follow me. I don't have any expectations. Let me prove myself. And it says, I've not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. Why do we strive to make ourselves so righteous when all Jesus wants us to be is sinners? And in being a sinner, we come to him, trust him because we realize we're a sinner. I'm sick. He noticed. But in that process, we come to him and we watch him, and he's so much more. To go along with this idea that Jesus calmed the storm and the disciples were terrified. In John 16, Jesus asked them, do you finally believe? But the time is coming, indeed it's here now, when you will be scattered, each one going his own way, leaving me alone. Yet I am not alone because the Father is with me. Real words of encouragement, right? I'm going to be scattered. I'm going to be alone. This is what I get for following you. This is what I get for following you. But then he goes on to say, yet I'm not alone because the Father is with me. I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Peace in me. You just told me we're going to be scattered. You just told me we're going to be going our own way. You just told us we're going to be alone. And now you're telling me that you told me that so that I can have peace in you? How does that make sense? And he goes on to say, here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. So, even though you'll be alone, even though you'll be scattered at times, even though you'll face trials and persecutions, everything in this world is small compared to what I've done for you. I've overcome everything. There's nothing that can hinder you. There's nothing that can hurt you more than temporarily because I have overcome this world. I fixed your everlasting fear. I fixed your permanent struggles. And now all you have is a small, temporary trials. Now, I'm not trying to demean or minimize any trial you may be going through. Things on this earth hurt. They cause us pain. Things like impairs that. No one should ever have to deal with that. No one should ever have to go through it. But we know when our perspective is on Jesus, he's so much bigger than those things. He's so much bigger than the things we focus on and dwell on and worry about. He says, take heart, I've overcome the world. And going back to the idea that churches kind of have distorted what it means to follow Jesus. I want to look at what it really does mean. Because I think we've kind of made it like a business, like an interview almost. And people come seeking Jesus. And we're like, okay, well, bring your resume and some references and things like that. We'll meet and we'll determine if you're good enough. And that's absolutely not what Jesus called people to. And that's not the people Jesus called. Jesus called people to follow him like a father calls a child. And if you've ever asked your child to do anything with you, especially in infancy, when we're talking about these guys have no real understanding of who Jesus is, he hasn't proved himself. They're infants in this. And he says, come follow me. And you don't say, hey, come help me work on the car, because that infant can really help you work on the car. No dad does that. No mother bakes with their child because the child is proficient in baking. They make more of a mess. They require a lot more cleanup. And then there's like snot and spit and everything and whatever they bake. And the idea that we're going to add value to Jesus because he called us is completely ridiculous. We're like that kid who's just getting spit and snot over everything. Like, we are called because Jesus wants to spend time with us. Every time I vacuum, Cadence runs up and she says, I want to help. She doesn't help at all. She just goes in the same place. But I let her do it every time. Because I love the fact that she's watching me. And I love the fact that she's trying to imitate me. And here's what Jesus is doing here. He's saying, follow me, and you'll become like me. You don't have to bring anything to the table. Follow me, and I'll take care of the rest. You may make more of a mess than if I did it myself, but I want you here with me. And as a child, we take pride in the joy of that parent. So it's not like God's saying, I'm going to tolerate you because you're my child. No parent is like that. It's come be with me because I love being with you. And my joy is contagious. And, I grew up following people around trying to help with everything. I never learned how to do any of it. I didn't. I mess things up a lot better than I fix things. But the fact that people allow me to belong before I could contribute anything led to my believing. And once I started walking with Jesus, once I started taking those steps out of the shallow end and letting him prove who he was, I started looking in the mirror and I didn't recognize who I saw. Jesus didn't tell me to change. I spent time with Jesus and I said, if I want to be like this, I've got to change this. It was my choice. Jesus never forced anything on me. He told me to follow him. And following someone so amazing made me want to change. And that's the call. And guys, like I said, sometimes we mess it up because checklists are easier. Because our behavior is something we can control. We can't control a God that can control storms. So why don't we bring this into something that we can control? And that's what we try to do. The problem is when I start sacrificing, I expect other people to sacrifice. If I'm being self-righteous, I look down on other people who aren't sacrificing the same things I am. I start to judge people for their behavior because I'm not content with what I have to give up. And that's the situation we have in the church now. Other people think we just condemn them because they're sinners. We're sinners too. So when did we make the change from sinner to righteous? And how do we get back to sinner? Because that's who Jesus wants to be with. No, I'm not saying go back and start sinning again. But I'm saying this is who Jesus came to spend time with. People who realize their need for him. And it seems like our method of discipleship is go, make people look like us and then take them to Jesus and say, hey, look what I did. But why don't we just take people who are hurting to Jesus and let him work on them in the process of them following him? It takes us out of the equation, which is a really good thing most of the time. And I just challenge you. God's call to follow is not, I'm going to put you in the lineup, but you have to hit a home run. God's call is to take one step. Peter, I know you're a fisherman, but just trust me enough to cast out into deep water. You know, Matthew, follow me. Church, follow me. Take one step. And I guarantee Jesus will prove trustworthy. And when we take one step, it leads to another and another. And maybe that step is to talk to that person at work that you've been meaning to talk about. Maybe it's joining one of the awesome new life groups, journey groups that we're going to start at this church in January. Maybe it's getting plugged in for you. Maybe that's way out of your comfort zone, but Jesus has been telling you for a while, you really need to be involved in a community of believers. And maybe your step is to join that group. Maybe you're already in a group and Jesus is saying, it's time for you to step up and lead one. This isn't a huge step. This is, I'm going to choose to go shopping with people from the church. I'm going to choose to go to a baseball game with these people. It's not a life commitment. Jesus didn't say, quit everything, stop being who you are, and become my follower. He said, follow me right now. In your talents, in your gifts, in your abilities, follow me wherever you are. And once we take those steps, that's when we start to see this guy really is who he says he is. And I can really trust him. And that's when change starts happening. So I challenge you guys to allow people to belong in your life and to belong to Jesus before they believe or behave. Because belonging leads to change when you're around someone like Jesus. And I truly believe that. And as the band comes up, I want you to think about that idea of the Father calling. A father doesn't call first to responsibility. He calls to adventure. Let's go on a walk. Let's do things together. Let's spend time together. And, you know, over time the relationship develops. And you start to trust and you start believing that what Jesus tells me I should do is going to make me better. It's going to make me stronger. It's going to grow me. And then it's not, hey, you're just putting responsibilities on me. You're not just putting rules on me. You're investing in me. And I look at, take for example, a teenager. Why does a teenager want to get a car? For freedom. Right? They want to be able to go and do their own thing and stuff like that. I wanted that so much. But over time, it's like, I've got errands to run. It becomes an obligation. I have to go pick up my brother. You know, I have to go pick up my sister. I have to go to school now. I went to school before I drove. But I had to do these things. And it became what was an idea of freedom became an obligation. And that's where a lot of Christianity is. We've forgotten about the freedom that God said, come, follow me wherever you are, whoever you are. And we think, well, God just wants me to read my Bible every day and pray and not cuss and not drink and not hang out with bad people and not watch things that I shouldn't on TV. No, God's still calling you to follow. And God's still wanting to be that Father that's going to lead you and teach you through experience. No kid watches other people and logically decides, well, I think it's time to walk. And, you know, I studied the mechanics, and now I think I can behave like these people. What they do is they see other people walk, and it creates a passion in them. And they desire to walk because they see other people walk. That's our job. We don't have to teach people to walk. We just have to walk and create a passion to walk in other people. That's our call as a church. Father is, and realize that we have the opportunity to take people to Him. Come meet my Father. And as we sing this song's called Good, Good Father. And I just want you to reflect on those times when God has brought you out, when He has taught you, when He's built you up, when He's affirmed you. And I want you to think about people in your life who you can be that person to them. And as we stand and sing, guys, I just want you to know that there's no expectation. I'm going to stand up. There's no expectation to be anything. It's just follow and watch me. And that's simple enough for anybody. So let's pray, guys. Lord, we love you so much. And God, I'm so grateful that you don't call me to be anyone other than who you created me to be. And God, I spent years and years not satisfied with who you made me to be, pursuing something else. But Lord, in times like this, I just realized all you wanted was for me to follow, to trust you enough to take a step, and you met me there every time I took a step. And Lord, I pray that for everyone here. I pray that you open their eyes to see that that's true in their past. And God, I pray that right now, as people are challenged to take steps, that you will give them the courage to trust in you enough to take that step. And Lord, I know and I thank you that you're going to come through for them. And Lord, as we celebrate today, as we celebrate your goodness, just be glorified in our worship. Know that we are absolutely nothing without you. Paul says, if we add anything or take anything away from the gospel, it ceases to be the gospel. So let's take away all our expectations, all our experiences, and just believe that you're a good Father. For in your name we pray. Amen.